Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. We're going to let everyone get joined in here, and then we will get started. Welcome to those that are joining. We will start here shortly. Okay, great. Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Whitney Sani. I'm a citizen of Cherokee Nation, and I am the Communications Manager for the Native American Agriculture Fund. We are grateful for your time today, and thank you for joining us for a review of the NAAF request for application. Before we start our presentation, I would like to review a few housekeeping items with you. First, we will have a dedicated question and answer session at the end of the presentation. We have members of our team monitoring the questions box as they come through the Zoom chat box. To ensure we are able to communicate all information and make this accessible to those joining in by phone, we will read through all presentation slides. In addition, the webinar will be recorded and posted to the NAAF website, along with an option to download the PowerPoint presentation slides. We will also follow up with an email to all registered webinar participants to view this recording. Today's presentation will be led by two members of our team, Tony Stanger McLaughlin, CEO of NAAF, and Belton Moore, Associate Program Officer. So with that, we will go ahead and get started.
As Whitney said, I'm Belton Moore. I'm an Associate Program Officer with NAAF. I'm also a member of the Lumbee Tribe of North Carolina. We're excited for you to join our webinar today to learn about the 2022 Request for Applications process. I'll now turn it over to our CEO, Tony Stanger McLaughlin, to start off our webinar.
Thank you, Belton and Whitney, and thank you all for joining us today for our first webinar of our series of webinars that we launch every year during our Request for Applications. The Native American Agriculture Fund is a private charitable trust, and we were created in 2018 via the Keepsego-Beeville Sac settlement. The settlement alleged discriminatory lending practices by the United States Department of Agriculture, and the original claimants and their class were formed through claiming violations of the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, the ECOA. The leftover funding that created NAAF expires in 2038. We have 20 years to spend down the funds. Each year we will do a granting cycle. This is our fourth granting cycle. Prior to NAAF's establishment, there was additional funding that went out that was part of the original Cypre agreement, and that was called Fast Track. The Fast Track funding, again, was provided prior to NAAF's inception, but you might see some of the original Fast Track grantees have been NAAF grantees as well, but the Fast Track grants that went out have all been distributed, and and you can read about them and the work that they did and will continue to do with the Fast Track funding on our website. We have had funding cycles in 2019, 2020, and 2021. We're entering our 2022 funding cycle, and NAAF looks forward to returning applications and new applications. The mission of NAAF, what is per our trust agreement, and our trust agreement was agreed upon by the courts, the original claimants, both the Department of Justice and the Department of Agriculture. The trust is our guiding document. This is what we have to abide by through NAAF's existence. And the mission in the trust agreement states that we must provide business assistance, agricultural education, technical support, and advocacy services to Native American farmers and ranchers to support and promote their continued engagement in agriculture. You can see on our website and here today some of our grantees. We are trying to fund in as many states as we can, and we would like our geographical footprint to expand each year. But again, we know that a great number of our applicants are going to exist where any country is and where reservations exist. You can see that we have a pretty good stretch across the United States. And all of this information, again, is located on our website. You can look at our former reports and find out what we funded and which each of those little pins represent. They represent various entities and projects, and each year those projects change. So even if we have funded an entity once, the project the second year could be different. So again, encourage you to visit our website to learn more about where we funded in the past. The 2022 RFA Overview. Our eligible entities, again, are included in our trust agreement, but those are 501c3 organizations, educational organizations, including elementary, all the way through college, community development financial institutions, also known as CDFIs, tribes and their instrumentalities, including state recognized tribes. Important information for fiscal sponsors. NAAF allows fiscal sponsors. A fiscal sponsor is an entity that will apply on behalf of another entity that is not yet a fully established 501c3. In this instance, NAAF encourages startup nonprofit organizations that have applied for their 501c3 status from the IRS, but have not yet received a favorable determination to apply through a fiscal sponsor who can also provide important technical support for proposed project activities. If fiscal sponsors are used, this fiscal sponsor must be an eligible 501c3 organization and should follow the guidance in NAAF's fiscal sponsor information, which you can find within our application. You can also find it on our website where we have a Word document that represents the questions that we ask within the application. If you have any additional requests for information on being a fiscal sponsor or using a fiscal sponsor, you can email us, and our contact information is at the end of this presentation. All right, Belton, I'll hand it over to you for this slide.
Thank you, Tony. So you'll find on our website the copy of the 2022 Request for Applications Overview. So here are just a few of the things that are included in that document. We begin with allowable use of funds, essentially what you can apply for a grant from NAAF for. Addressing access to capital, this is really key, and we'll touch on this later in this webinar. Cost sharing or matching funds, collaborations, cooperators, and leveraging, limitation on direct costs, eligibility of previous grantees, unallowable use of funds, and the initial review on eligibility. And again, you'll find all of this information in the RFA on our website.
Access to capital. Again, as I said at the beginning of this presentation, the foundation of this case was based on the lack of access to capital and credit servicing to Native American farmers and ranchers. Access to capital, therefore, is a foundational principle in the work that NAAF will do, what we've done in the past and what we will continue to do in the future. Access to capital can mean a number of things, and it's very broad. Access to capital was, again, the core of the KeySequel case. Applications that don't address access to capital will not be funded in 2022. Please see our video on our website concerning access to capital, where we will explain in depth the reason why we have to adhere to including access to capital in the work that we do, but also some examples of how others have been able to include access to capital in their applications. Again, it's very broad, and this includes projects from elementary school, direct farm operations, tribal applications and their projects. And we have our video, but we also have in our Q&A some questions. And again, go back to our website and look at what we funded in the past, and you'll see that in every application and a lot of those projects, they are able to interweave access to capital in the work that they do. And when we say access to capital, it's very broad. We can be talking about credit education, but we could also, the CDFIs that we work with, they do direct lending. And so think very broadly about how you can include that in your application. But a word of caution, if you say, and you click the box, because that's a question where you have to check yes or no, if you're going to provide access to capital and you will not be able to go any further if you don't check yes on that application question, you also have to include it in other parts of your application. You can't simply check that box. You need to see it in your application. We need to see it in your budget documents. We also need to see it in your project goals and deliverables. So make sure if you check that box, you also include it somewhere else within the application. All right, Belton, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you, Tony. So our first organization that we will, first eligible entity type that we will discuss today are 501c3 nonprofits. So the general focus area for these 501c3s are business assistance, agriculture education, technical support, and/or advocacy services. And then we also have special focus areas. And the ones that 501c3s are eligible to apply for are beginning farmer and rancher, climate resilience, conservation, and disaster assistance. This year we have an available pool of $2 million. And for the general focus, the minimum request is $150,000 and the maximum request is $200,000. There are different mins and maxes for the special focus, and we will review those later on in this webinar. So the second type are educational organizations. Again, they have the same general focus areas as the 501c3s, business assistance, agricultural education, technical support, and advocacy services. And then special focus areas for educational organizations are beginning farmer and rancher, climate resilience, conservation, and disaster assistance, and communal land acquisition for tribal colleges and universities, or TCUs only. This also has an available pool of $2 million with a minimum request of $150,000 for the general focus and maximum request of $200,000 for the general focus. For a few reminders for our educational organizations, we have a really broad definition of educational organizations, as Tony mentioned earlier. This covers all of those organizations under Section 170BIA2 of the IRS Code, including K-12 and post-secondary institutions, such as tribal colleges and universities, TCUs, Native American serving non-tribal institutions, and other institutions. But these other institutions must have a history and experience in serving Native farmers and ranchers. We have further recommendations regarding FERTEP involvement, the Federally Recognized Tribes Extension Program. We require that you have those agents involved if they are present at your university in your project. Now we'll talk about CDFIs, or Community Development Financial Institutions. Their general focus is a little bit different from the others because of their different goals and work. It's loan capital, regranting capital, and technical assistance or business assistance. The special focus areas for CDFIs are beginning farmer and rancher, climate resilience, conservation and disaster assistance, and communal land acquisition. The available pool for CDFIs is $5 million. It's a little bit different. There are no published maximums or minimums. We just ask that you don't request the entire pool of $5 million. And now we will talk about tribes and their instrumentalities. So the general focus is the same for as for 501c3s and educational organizations, business assistance, agricultural education, technical support, and advocacy services. And then special focus areas are agriculture infrastructure, beginning farmer and rancher, climate resilience and conservation, and disaster assistance, and communal land acquisition. The pool for tribes is $2 million this year, and the minimum request for general focus is $150,000, and the maximum request is $200,000.
We'll do a special slide here on instrumentalities. Every tribe is unique, and both state and federally recognized tribes are eligible entities, and each one of those have their own instrumentalities that vary greatly, from Section 17 corporations to tribal farms or departments within tribes. It is up to the applicant to provide to us the governing documents that would provide to us the information so that we know that you're an eligible entity. If you are an instrumentality of a tribe applying on behalf of the tribe, then we need to know that the tribes, that you are a formal instrumentality. So you need to provide us that documentation. Again, I'll use section 17 as an example. If you are at section 17, then you need to provide us that information. Sometimes that includes resolutions or charter documentation. The other thing that we must have when we're including instrumentalities is to know that the instrumentality has the authority to apply for our funding on behalf of the tribe. We've had instances in the past where an instrumentality has applied without the consent of the tribe, and then we had issues of finalizing the grant agreement. So make sure that the instrumentality is communicating with the tribe, that we have some form of documentation on eligibility, but also that the tribe has agreed to allow the instrumentality to apply. So instrumentalities of tribes, state or federally recognized, again, can mean any number of things. And tribal governments have the latitude to determine which entities are instrumentalities of their governments. And NAAF only needs the proper documentation of that status. If an organization wishes to be considered as an instrumentality of a state government, the organization must secure and submit an authorizing document from their tribal government to that specific effect. We are going to talk later about sovereign immunity waivers in the next slides, but also when we're talking about instrumentalities and their authority to apply on behalf of their tribal governments, we only need enough information that we know that you have permission to apply. If your tribal government only meets a few times a year, or if they only allow votes of that nature to come up at certain types of meetings and maybe a general session where it's open to the full tribe, let us know that and we can still allow you to apply. But again, our contact information is going to be at the end of this slide, and our email that you would contact is grants@nativeamericanagriculturefund.org, where you can ask us those types of information. There's instances where we'll allow you to continue with your application if you supply us enough information that we know that the application is going to be approved, or that the tribe knows that the application is going to eventually need some type of resolution from the tribal government. But again, any questions, you can email us, you can call us, and the sooner the better. We ask that all questions of this nature throughout the application be asked at least 1 week prior to our application closing date. And we say that because we always have a number of applicants that come to us on the last day, in the 11th hour before we need to click submit, and we do not have the capacity. We have a small team at NAAF to answer all of those questions in a matter of hours. So the sooner you ask the questions, the better. Other information, as I stated earlier, important reminders for tribes that tribes are required to provide limited waivers of sovereign immunity. And they are required. This was required by our trust agreement, and there are no exceptions. The other important reminder for tribes is related to industrial hemp. Tribes are the only entity that are allowed to apply for feasibility and market studies only in our RFA. And that's because tribal governments are the entities that are eligible to apply for this funding through the federal government. And we need to make sure that the work that we are funding in this space currently is in compliance with all of those tribal, state, and federal laws. As hemp and the hemp industry and rulemaking continues to progress, NAAF will look at, and our board will determine other eligible entities if they can apply for this type of funding in the future, or if our funding will turn into eventually shovel to the ground or other types of funding related to hemp. But currently it's only for feasibility and market studies only. Again, if you have questions on hemp or the limited waiver of sovereign immunity, please contact us, and the sooner the better. We have a video on our website on limited waivers of sovereign immunity within the RFA application process. We also have model language related to sovereign immunity waivers. And please note that this is a limited waiver of sovereign immunity. So if your application is only for $50,000, say it's a youth application, and that youth application is only for 12 months, then the limited waiver of sovereign immunity is limited to that amount of money and the term of that grant. We have had a number of tribes that have applied for our funding and successfully provided limited waivers of sovereign immunity. We can walk you through this process. We can also engage with your tribe's law offices, whether they're in-house or outside general counsel, and communicate with the tribal government itself as we move through this process. Note that the final limited waiver of immunity will not be due until awards have been made and grant agreements are in the process. Generally, this allows you upwards of 3 months to prepare for the limited waiver of sovereign immunity. You can let your tribal government know now that eventually you will need a limited waiver of immunity. Again, you can look at our model language, you can review our video, and we can, for every tribe, knowing that every tribe is unique, we can adapt. We can also adapt as we move forward through the grant agreement process to make sure that we're respecting each tribe and tribe's sovereign immunity. Our process, unfortunately, requires a sovereign immunity waiver. We say unfortunately because we know that this is something that is very crucial to tribes. We want to make sure that we're respecting tribal governing authority, but it is part of our trust agreement. Therefore, we have to include it. But know that it has been done before, and we do have example language within our application process. So please reach out to us if you have any questions on limited waivers of sovereign immunity.
As I mentioned earlier, the special focus areas do have different minimum and maximum requests for each focus. So I'll go through in detail on these, and this is also included in our RFA in the application. So when you're going through, if you decide to apply for a special focus, please do pay attention to these different minimum and maximum request amounts. For agriculture infrastructure, only tribes are eligible to apply for this focus area, and the minimum request is $75,000 and the maximum request is $100,000. For beginning farmer and rancher, any eligible entity can apply for this funding. The minimum request is $50,000 and the maximum is $100,000. For climate resilience, conservation, and disaster assistance, any eligible entity can apply. The minimum is $50,000 and the maximum is $125,000. And lastly, for communal land acquisition, only TCUs or tribal colleges and universities, tribes themselves, or CDFIs, community development financial institutions, may apply for this funding. The minimum request is $100,000 and the maximum is $125,000.
A note to the special focus areas is that our general funding, which we talked about the max and minimum for those applications, this is embedded in that. This complements that part of our application process. So this is in addition to the funding that you could receive for those sections, you can add this. So for instance, if you are a CDFI and you're going after 200,000, you can come back in here and go after another eligible area that you're eligible for, say beginner farmer and rancher or the communal land acquisition, and go after an additional $125,000. This, for some entities, tribes in particular, that are eligible for a majority of these areas, you could move from having a project that is 50,000 towards upwards of 300,000 or more. So know that we also ask that you do not combine these applications, the general and the special emphasis areas, in a manner that they cannot exist separately or without us funding both of them. And that's to say, because sometimes in the review process, when all the applications come in, your targeted project is really good, but the special emphasis area that you're applying for might need a little bit of work. And so if you write the application in a manner where they can't exist outside of one another, then your targeted might not get approved. So make sure that even though the work that you're applying for and targeted, that this special emphasis can can complement that, but also that your special emphasis project might be able to exist on its own, because you can get one or the other, or you can get both. So our youth programming, again, our youth application is a separate application, and it has a separate closing date. All entities that we talked about prior are eligible to apply for the youth grant. This has its own process where if you've applied in the past, you can use a special tool that we have within our application process called Copy Process, and you can move all information from your last year's application to this year. If you have not yet applied, know that it's very similar to the same questions that we ask in our general application, but this is a smaller pool. There is available $1 million for our youth applications this year, and the caps and bases are between $20,000 and $40,000, and these are due by May 18th. We close our youth application process early because in earlier rounds of funding, we heard from educators and educational institutions that it would have been better for them to know exactly what they were going to be walking into towards the summer or the fall. So, and some of our school boards don't meet during the summer, and some educational educators are not available during the summer. So we close this one early so that we can notify it in June and allow, we shoot for June and August so that we can allow those eligible entities the summer, and they can get ready and prepare for their applications and project deliverables to begin in early fall. But note that this does end earlier. So if you are working on both a youth application and a general, we encourage you to finish your youth right away so that you meet that deadline. But again, a lot of that application questions are the same. So some of your documentation you can use in both applications, and it should speed up your process. So our application criteria, we get this question a lot in our RFA. In our RFA, we have a table of contents on our website where we ask all of these questions. So you can go directly to the specific page where you can find this information for each eligible entity type. But again, because this case was originally based on violations of access to credit and credit servicing, the largest component are the weighted, largest weight that we provide in our applications, kind of bonus points, are the impact on access to capital. So if your project is going to, and all of them have to include it, but if you check that box, then you are eligible for that 25% weight. Other areas that we provide this information are the weighted scoring is in proposed results and outcomes, farmer and rancher demand, team organizational capacity and collaborators, evaluation weight, and innovation and replicability. So proposed results and outcomes is another 25%. Farmer and rancher demand is 20%. Team organizational capacity and collaborators is 10%. Overall evaluation is 10%. And innovation and replicability is an additional 10%. If you have questions on the weighting score or the process itself, again, you can contact us on our email, grants@NativeAmericanAgricultureFund.org, or through our phone number. But note that our process includes 3 parts. We have an initial gleaning on eligibility, and it is the responsibility of each applicant to provide us enough information that we know that you are an eligible entity. It is also the burden of our applicant to provide to us information that we know that your eligible entity is in good standing. And an example is our 501c3s. If we do a third-party glean on our 501c3s and some of our other entities, looking at your tax information, if we see that you are not in good standing with the IRS or Treasury, then your application will not be reviewed. So we encourage you to look at that information prior to submitting your application. If you have questions or you want to make a comment on why Maybe it says you're not in good standing at that moment, that you are currently in the process of negotiating something that happened in prior years with the IRS or Treasury, or the tribal government itself, then please let us know ahead of time and we can flag that. But otherwise, that will make it to where we don't even get to look at your application in this first gleaning process. The second process is that we have internal and external evaluators. We go through an evaluation process for both the youth and general grant. We have scoring that takes place. And then we have deliberations where we discuss each application and the different entities that we want to recommend that ultimately our board makes this final determination. Currently, we have 14 board members. You can find the information on who our board members are on our website. But our overall process is very in-depth, and it continues to improve every year. And included in that is that if you do not get funded in this funding cycle, we will meet with you and have a specific phone call where we will talk about areas you can strengthen your application in the following year. We have had a number of applicants who have been denied in previous years, took that information and really implemented it in the following year, and were then funded that second or sometimes third time. We do try to, as we go through this process, make sure that we're funding various types of projects, that we're meeting the needs of Indian country agriculture, and that we are making sure that we're trying to reach all different parts of Indian country, from one coast to the other. So again, if you have any questions, please visit our website. So the application review, and that is outcome results-based projects, progress reporting and compliance, grantee convening, a cover letter, a resume of key personnel, budget and budget narrative, confidentiality and conflict of interest, and unsuccessful applicants. Our outcomes and results-based projects, a lot of our projects have projects that they're going to do in 12, 18, or 24 months. We know that COVID is affecting a lot of communities and still continues to affect communities. So we ask in the application if you can talk about that. Well, COVID potentially impact your ability to make sure that your outcomes and results can be done within 12, 18, or 24 months. And if you explain that in the application process, it helps us as we look through all the applications that are applying and what we can accomplish in that given time period. We have applications from 2019 that we're still trying to wrap up because entire communities have been shut down. A lot of our first applicants were based on community engagement, community involvement, and much of that has been put on hold for multiple years now. So again, think about that when you're in your application, and as we're reviewing the applications, that's what we're looking at too. We will not hold it against you if you're dealing with COVID or you have a community that's very vulnerable to COVID or COVID issues such as supply chains. We know that some of our very remote communities are impacted the most. If in the past you've had issues as a successful applicant of NAAF with reporting and compliance, that's taken into account as we review your application in the following year. So know that if you're coming in as a new applicant, that's something we're going to look at. Now that we have a record of previous applicants and processes, it is going to be something that we look at. Our compliance team does an update on former applicants. Did you turn in your reporting on time? And if you were impacted and your community was impacted by various issues related to COVID, did you let us know that? We are a private entity. We're not the federal government. We don't want this to be a real drawn out process that is a burden to you or your community, but we do need for you to communicate. And sometimes that is one sentence and it says, your tribe is shut down because of COVID, period. That gives us enough notice, but we need that communication to take place. And again, because that does, during the application review process, that does come up. We do have a grantee convening each year. This coming year, we'll have our first in-person grantee convening. In each application, we ask you to reserve enough money to attend for one person in your project to be able to attend that grantee convening. And again, we haven't been able to meet because of COVID, and we've allowed our former grantees to reallocate that funding into other areas of their application. But we intend to start having those grantee convenings in person. We're really excited and we look forward to meeting all of our grantees. We ask that you have cover letters. Your cover letters and other aspects of your application, some of it are required and some of them are optional, but it just gives us more information. It's an opportunity for you to further explain to us who you are and what you want to accomplish, or who you're working with to accomplish those goals. Make sure that all those attachments, they are in PDF and they are included. The resume of your key personnel. So one of the questions that we get in our application is that we are not required. We are not a tribal government. We are not IHS. We're not BIA. We cannot require Native preference. It wasn't included in the original trust agreement. We have eligible entities that are the foremost experts in what they do. Maybe it's in a certain type of crop or commodity. When the trust was being established, those entities that were key decision makers and who would be eligible determined that in some instances it might not be a Native-led entity that would be able to provide the most service to those communities. The requirement that NAAF has and our trust agreement has is that it serves a Native community, whether it's being conducted by a Native or non-Native is not a requirement, but we do encourage Native preference to the extent that we can, in that in your application, if you are engaging consultants, if you're working with an educational institution, we want to know and we want to see that you're engaged in the community, you have community buy-in, that you have tribal participation. And so those are things we look at when we look at your resume and key personnel, and then we look at your budget to know that if you're engaging in maybe an environmental consultant, that environmental consultant is tribal. If you're not using a tribal consultant, then explaining to us that person that you're hiring has been working with tribes for a number of years, that they focus exclusively in working with tribes. Those are the types of things that we're going to look at in depth in each application. But again, we know that some of our entities are not going to be tribally led, are 100% tribally operated. We just ask that you explain that in your application, and some of the areas that we glean that information is in your cover letters and your resume and your budget and budget narrative. We hold confidentiality and conflict of interest in a very high regard at NAAF, and we implement that within our staff, but also within our board members and any external evaluators that come in to review these applications. We have a process of gleaning that for conflicts of interest, but in particular confidentiality. We use a third grant making application software system, and that software system that we use is a company that has thousands of other similar entities, nonprofits, educational institutions that use their software system. They have incredible layers of confidentiality and security. So know that is something that we hold in high regard, and any of the information that you provide to us is held in that space. There are some tools that this software system allows for you to utilize, and in particular, it's really perfect for COVID, as many of our communities are still shut down, or we've moved remote, your communities move remote. We have a tool called that Collaborator that will allow you to invite others to be part of your application process, but you have the authority to allow them the level of engagement that they'll have in your application. So some of it is edit, they can view, they can edit, or they can submit. If you allow someone to submit, then they have the authority to review all parts of your application, including your budget information. So know that when you're in the application process. We have more on that later in this website as we move through how to apply in Found It. And again, unsuccessful applicants will have the opportunity to engage with us one-on-one to find out how they can improve their application in our next funding cycle. Notes on the budget. NAAF's indirect limit is 15%, and there are no exceptions. And that was part of NAAF's trust agreement. There are some educational institutions that have made exceptions that have never made that exception in the past, but they have done that for NAAF's application process. Same with tribal governments. So understand that that is a hard 15%. If you have questions on what indirect is and how you can maneuver that within your application, you can reach out to us. Applicants must follow the budget guidelines and use our required template. The first year we allowed everyone to do their own template, and it was way too time consuming for our reviewers to get through this process and our trustees to go in. Some of them were 2 pages, some of them were almost 100 pages. So understand that we have a template, and that template is designed to make this easy for you and also for our staff. So use the budget, the required budget template. And again, this will be the same template that we hope to use in success in other years. We've really made sure, and we evaluate all of our application and every part of our application. Every year we went through and we made our budget template even easier this year. So use that template. If you don't, that could kick your application out from getting approved. Also, applicants must abide by the requests for minimum and maximum as listed in each category. So again, for CDFIs, we say, please don't ask for the full 5 million. And if you do, that could affect your application in its review and our ability to review this, because as we're reviewing the minimums and maximums, we want to make sure that we, as much as possible, are funding your application at 100%, so that you know exactly what what you have provided to us and what you're going to get. In our first funding cycle, we did not have a minimum. We didn't have bases and caps in our applications. And it made for a really long process of getting through grant agreements, because we had to do a lot of budget modifications. Somebody came in and said, I want 300,000. And after we went through and picked all of the successful applicants, we said, actually, we only have 85,000. And it meant that it could impact their whole project. And so this, what we have right now, the process that we have to have a pool, a base, and a cap is meant to make your job easier, but also to make the process of getting our grant agreements out the door easier for our staff, and improve the amount of time it takes for you to get that money into your account and start working within your communities. Critical deadlines are that our NAAF youth funding does close early. So be prepared to get that application in first if you're applying for both the youth and the general. The youth closes on May 18th, 2022 at 11:59 p.m. Central. Our applications have always been in Central Time. So be prepared to accommodate whatever time zone you're in to meet that Central Time deadline. And again, we encourage you to turn it in early, because we have had applicants that they're 1 minute late and this system shuts off, and we do not provide extensions. If it is, we have had people that have come to us and said that it was our software system. We make sure that our software system that we use knows when our deadline is closing, when we're going to have heavy traffic. The same with our website. And in the system that we use, it's called Foundit. Everything is timestamped. We can go in there and we can see how much of your application was done, who was in there, how long they were in there. So we've had applicants that said, oh, I missed the deadline by 1 minute. Can I turn it in tomorrow? But then we go in and we say they didn't even have their uploads ready. They only had 20% of the application process complete. So even if they missed it by 1 minute, they wouldn't have made it. And so just know that we very, very, very rarely can make an exception on the deadline. So Yeah, if you're in there and you're having issues, you can let us know ahead of time. We try to have staff all the way to 11:59 Central available to you, but there's hundreds of people that are applying on that last day. The NAAF 2022 General RFA closes on June 1st, and that is June 1st, 2022 at 11:59 Central. And again, the reminder, there is no opportunity to edit the application after the deadline. So do your best. And another note of caution, if you are allowing other people to be part of your application process, make sure that you know who's going to submit. Unfortunately, we had an applicant last year who had around 4 people that were in the system. They all thought somebody else had clicked submit, and ultimately nobody clicked submit. So make sure that you know who your point of contact is, who is going to click submit, so that your application makes it in on our deadline. So now we'll start into the process of what does it look like when you're applying in our grant software system through Foundant. And this is an online application. You click the portal to get to this page that you see right now from our website. So returning applicants, you can log on using your existing credentials. New applicants, you will click the Create New Account button. Notice on the welcome page off to this side that we have some links for you, so that if you are unsure if you're an eligible entity, or if you are not the correct person that would get in here, maybe you're not the grant maker for your tribe, grant writer for your tribe, or you're not the grant writer for your educational institution, but you're just looking to see what this will entail, then we encourage you to go and click the PDF version of what the application will look like instead of getting in here. Because if you get in here, we're going to ask you for your own personal information. Then we're going to ask you for your institutional information. And if you're not that person, then it turns into multiple applications for the same tribe. And it also kind of gums up our system. And it means that our numbers are skewed, because it looks like we had a bunch of people who didn't make it through the process. And then our trustees come to us and say, well, how come 68 people didn't make it through the grant process? Well, that's because a lot of people, and I'm guilty, I do this too, whenever I see funding out there, I want to see what it's about and what I'm going to have to do to get that funding. I'll go into the application process. So we caution you, please don't. That's what you can find right here on these links, and you can find them on our website, is the PDF versions of what this application will entail. And if you are a new user and you go through this create your account process, the email that you use will then be your login information. So please make sure that you are the correct person that needs to be in here, but also make sure that you're going to have access to that email moving forward, because that's going to be your username. The other thing is if you can't remember your password after you've been in the system, there you can do the forgot password, and you don't necessarily need us for that, but we can help you through that. But again, it's a pretty simple process. You do the forgot password, and you'll get a link to your email that you provided as your initial email address and username. We also ask that if you're a tribe or any other eligible entity, that only one person is getting in here. Each application is its own username, its own project. We do have sometimes where different departments of tribes, or maybe a tribal colleges or CDFI are applying. Eligible entities are different, but if you are a tribe, you have one application, and that's it. You can't have multiple applications for the same tribe for various departments of the tribe. So think about that across our eligible entity types. Think about that within your eligible entity. Who's going to apply? What's the project going to look like? You can apply on behalf of other departments within your tribe within the application process, but it's one application. Once you get in and you've created your username, this is what your dashboard will look like. And it won't say sandbox in the background. This is just an example of what a dashboard looks like, but you'll see your applicant information that will have your address, your point of contact, your organization's information, contact history. But once you get in there, you will see the ability to apply for our youth or our RFA. We also have some other things. We use this software system for employees, hiring. We use it for requests for proposals. But note that you will only be applying for, or you'll be applying for the grant process. So make sure that when you see that as an opportunity to apply, you're applying for the 2022 grant process, either youth or general. The other thing that you'll find is if you have already been an applicant within NAAF, you'll see your current active requests. You can also see your historical requests. And again, there's a tool that you can use called Copy Process that will copy over your former application and all the information from your prior applications into this new application. So again, there's the apply button, and you'll see 2022 requests for general or youth. Make sure that those are the things you're applying to. We do have a couple of positions that we have one that's live right now. We have another one that will be live during this grant application process. So if you want to apply to be an employee, that's great. But this particular RFA, it will state specifically 2022 general, and that's what you'll click to apply to. And again, both the youth and the general, you need to apply for separately. So you will go through the process of clicking apply to the general or the youth. Again, youth closes early, so try to get the application in sooner. So once you're in the application, you will see after you click the entity type that you are, and then the types of additional funding that you want to apply for, that's the information that you'll see. If you are a tribe, you won't see the specific questions for a CDFI. So know that as you're moving through the process, it relates to the eligible entity type that you are applying as. Our application process, it looks really big and lengthy, but a lot of this is demographic information that we're asking you. We're trying to glean information on the type of project that you're going to pursue, the amount of farmers and ranchers that you're going to serve. So know that even though it looks lengthy, the process you can get through it relatively quickly. And I'm going to use an example. One year we had an applicant who went on maternity leave during our 2-month open period, came back, did not realize that our grant application was open. I think it was around 1:30 in the afternoon. She sent us a message asking for an extension. Unfortunately, we don't provide those, but she was still able to get her entire application in from the afternoon, 1:30 in the afternoon before 11:59 that night. So it can be done, but we encourage you to try to get it done ahead of time. The sooner, the better. So again, the important dates related to this RFA and to the application itself, save these dates. This is a pre-recorded webinar, but at the end of each webinar, we have really engaging Q&A where you can ask us specific questions about your application or the process itself. So those dates include Thursday, April 14th from 2 to 4, which is the first webinar, the one we're recording today. Thursday, April 21st from 2 to 4 p.m. and again, Central Time for the youth RFA if you plan on applying for the youth. Thursday, April 28th from 2 to 4 p.m. Central. Thursday, May 12th from 2 to 4 Central, and Thursday, May 26th from 2 p.m. Central. And note that Thursday, May 26th, our last RFA webinar, is mostly Q&A. We really limit the amount of background information. This webinar is also recorded. You can access it on our website, but make sure if you have any questions, that's your last opportunity to engage with us and our staff and ask those questions in real time, and that is on May 26th from 2 to 4 p.m. If you need to contact us, our email address is grants, GRANTS, at nativeamericanagriculturefund.org. You have to spell out the whole thing. It's a really long email address, but again, it's pretty easy to remember because it's our full name. Our phone number and where you can leave a voicemail and we will get back to you in a timely manner is 479-445-6226. And if you have any media questions, you can contact media at nativeamericanagriculturefund.org. Again, MEDIA at nativeamericanagriculturefund.org. We monitor our inbox. We also monitor our phone. And we have a special process that we engage in during all of our open grant period, where we document when the phone call comes in, what the question is, and who within our staff is going to answer that question. Some of these are relatively easy. Maybe you forgot your password from last year and you need assistance getting back into the software system. Then that's an easy answer. But some of them, especially those related to tribal sovereign immunity waivers, those can take longer. But we document when the question comes in, who's going to handle it, and then their responsive time. And generally, we answer all of our questions within 28 to 48 hours. If you are not having a response, that email at grants@ is also documented and timestamped, and again, very responsive. We have multiple people that monitor these inboxes every day during our open grant process. So thank you for your interest in our grant process. Understand that each year for the foreseeable future, we have a timeline. We do not exist after 2038, and we will have a wind down period prior to that. But we envision that we will be doing grant making for at least the next 12 years. We've already provided over $72 million in funding, and this funding cycle includes $12 million. And we are so excited for your application, to hear what you want to do within your community, and know that the base of our case is a result of the Keep Siegel v. Vilsack litigation. We do have some of that background information on the case within our website, but also you can Google it to find out more about where we came from and the funding that we have to utilize over our 20-year period. And understand that we have to abide by our CyPRAE provisions in our grant agreement, which again is related to access to credit and credit servicing and supporting Native American farmers and ranchers. And Native American farmers and ranchers is very broadly defined. It includes fisher women and men. It also includes forestry and grasslands. Think about things that you're eligible to apply for within the Department of Agriculture, and those generally are eligible projects that we can fund within NAAF. We are a private entity, and we are not here to replace the federal government. So if your application is something that you can receive within the Department of Agriculture, note that that will be noted in our application process, and you likely won't get funded, because we will then send you to the department, the agency, office, or mission area that conducts that. We want to make sure that the federal government, in their trust and fiduciary obligation, is continuing to serve our communities. But if your project is a gap fill, maybe USDA, you're not eligible for USDA funding, you can still apply for our funds. We did include in this year a couple additional special emphasis areas that also have programs within the Department of Agriculture, and that's beginning and farm and ranch special emphasis areas. We also have special emphasis for conservation practices, but I encourage you to go to the website and understand where those projects are and within the federal government, and what you could apply for, and how your project is going to be different, or why your project's needed. And perhaps it's that you are applying for our funding so that you can leverage and apply for federal funding, which is something that other eligible entities have done in the past. Our funding being private can be used in that manner, and same with the communal land. Communal land special emphasis in this year's application, it might not seem like a lot of money, that cap in that funding special emphasis area. But if you're looking at applying for a federal secured or guaranteed loan, you generally only need a small percentage down. And the amount of money that you can get from NAAF in the communal land funding area should be enough to get you a pretty significant piece of property, or for you to consolidate other issues within the land holding that you currently have. But again, NAAF is a private entity birthed out of the Keep Siegel v. Vilsack. So note that a lot of the work that we do and what we focus on is to support the initial harms of the original claimants, and make sure that we're trying to solve those harms and make sure that they don't happen in the future. But it also means that we're limited on what the extent of work that we can do in Indian country. This project, unfortunately, was not based on traditional harms, traditional food practice harms. We include that, and we do encourage that in our applications. And a lot of our youth applications include traditional foods and language within their application. But ultimately, the claimants that filed this class action were based in production agriculture, and that therefore is what we fund at NAAF. So again, thank you for your interest in your application.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for staying with us during that presentation. We are now going to move into our question and answer section. So go ahead and submit your questions here via the question box or the chat. And I'm going to go ahead and ask a couple of the first ones here. So Belton, we have a question that says that this person is a native urban-based farming community. Does that fit with native farms or ranches?
Yeah, thank you, Whitney, for the question. And thank you to whoever submitted that question. So I think the best way to answer this one is just to read this section from the RFA. Bear with me, please. So it's really broad, and you'll hear that. So the terms farmer and rancher should be interpreted in the broadest context possible and are meant to include farmers of all types of food and fiber products and ranchers of all types of livestock, as well as those engaged in fisheries, aquaculture, or forest products. Farmers and ranchers can also be interpreted to mean those engaged in community-based agriculture, such as community gardens, hunting, and gathering for food production purposes, and other means that individuals and communities in Indian country engage in through the process of feeding their communities. Young, beginning, and new farmers and ranchers are a key constituency, and that refers to any reference to farmer and rancher should be interpreted to include people seeking to start agriculture production and related activities. Value-added agriculture is meant to broadly include all types of processes by which value is added to raw agricultural products or raw hunted or gathered products that will result in a product used to feed those within or outside native communities, and which can be used to engage in markets outside our communities. It really depends. Would need to know a little bit more information about your specific work in those urban areas, but there's nothing in our RFA that excludes urban areas at all. So we welcome you to submit a question to our email with a little bit more information about your organization. But our definition is very broad, and you can refer back to that in the RFA. It's on page 4 of our RFA, and just give us an email or give us a call if you need any more information.
Great, thank you, Belton. Another question we had come in is, are the special focus categories an add-on to the general focus? As in, are there more funds available if you build your application covering a general focus and then add in any special focus that is congruent with your project?
Yes, so you are eligible to apply for both the general focus and special focus depending on your entity type. So you may be able, if you're a CDFI, you may be able to apply for the general focus and the communal land acquisition. So just note for those projects, they are separate projects, and if you're awarded, those will be separate grant agreements, and you could be awarded for one and not the other. So those do need to be standalone projects. In case you are awarded one and not the other, that project needs to be able to continue without the funds from your other proposal. So keep that in mind. They can be interconnected. They kind of can play off of each other, but they do have to be able to stand alone in case one is not funded.
Great. And for a clarification, if a tribe wanted to submit an application for part of the communal land acquisition category, as well as the ag infrastructure category, as long as the combined request does not exceed the 200,000 limit, is that still eligible?
Yes, so for this one, those limits actually apply specifically to the general focus or the special focus. So you can apply for the general focus up to 200,000, and then you can apply for the special focus up to the limit for that. I think for communal land, it's 125,000. So you can, those limits are meant to be interpreted for those specific, the general focus or the special focus. Does that explain it, Whitney? Kind of, what do you think that addresses the question?
And if the person who has the question had a follow-up, we'll be happy to address that as well. And if you have a additional question as a follow-up, let us know. But one more piece is, can we use the same proposal for general and youth grants?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the different categories, general versus youth, are different. If you are seeking to do youth programming, we do ask that you apply for the youth programming. That's a separate application when you go on our website, as Tony mentioned in the webinar. So the projects would need to be different if you're applying for both. You're more than welcome to apply for both, but you would need to have different narratives and budgets, a different project, because we're kind of asking for different things. For the youth, it is solely youth. For the general, it's wide open. For generally, our mission areas for producers.
Great. Let's see here. Do we need matching funds?
No. So that's in the webinar. We do not require cost sharing or matching funds at all. Please do let us know. We ask a question in the application about leveraging. So if you're thinking about maybe using our grant as matching funds for a different grant, or if you have additional funds that you want to leverage, you can let us know that. It helps us to really get a picture of how you're seeking to fund this project, because you might have a project that is above our maximum request amount. And so we want to get an idea of whether you're able to continue with this project with the NAAF funding and using additional funding, but we do not require cost sharing or matching.
Great, thank you, Milton. We do have a two-part question here. And the first one I can answer, which is, would it be possible to get the recording of the youth programming info on the session that was recorded on April 21st? And absolutely, yes, you can. We can follow up with you individually, or it is also already on the website. So if you wanted to access it immediately following this webinar, if you scroll to the bottom of that 2022 RFA webpage, it is there. It is also on our YouTube channel as well. But then the second part of this question, they're coming from Hawaii. So they're asking a question about Native leadership and representation. And the question is there a minimum number or percentage of executives or board members that must be Native Hawaiian?
No, so we don't have any minimums. We really just ask those questions, like I said earlier, for the other question, to just get a sense of your organization, who's leading that organization, who's going to actually be working on the project, who is on your board. So you can just let us know, but there's no question that asks, a certain percentage or a certain number. In that same section, you will see a question about agriculture and who your organization is serving. And that question does ask you to kind of give a ballpark percentage. Does your organization, out of the folks that you serve, does it serve 50% Native folks or more than that? So that's in the same section, but for the Native led, you can just do a narrative format and explain to us, let us know who's on your executive team, on your board, and their tribal affiliations. It really just gives us a better sense of your organization, because unfortunately we're not able to really to speak with you. So this is really all the information that we're able to evaluate during our deliberations. And so we want to do our best to get to know the organization, and that just helps kind of be a bigger picture, part of the bigger picture.
Thanks, Milton. I do want to answer a question here about templates and how to use those. And I think this is maybe what you're asking. We do have templates available on that RFA webpage. I'll have a member of our team drop in a link to that, just in case, to make sure that you know where to find that information. Because I believe, Belton, correct me if I'm wrong, we have the budget narrative template, the budget template itself. And am I missing any others there?
Yeah, there's a few templates. Let me pull that up and I'll make sure mention all of them. So the budget is the biggest one. So we have a template that is blank, and then we also have a sample budget. So you can go in there in the sample and see what it would look like. And then we also have a sample budget narrative. So that there's no template for the budget narrative because it would just really be blank. That's really kind of just a Word document that you convert into a PDF, and you go line by line and explain. But you can look at the sample one and just take out that sample information if you'd like. And then for the limited waivers, if you're a tribe or instrumentality, we do have templates for that, or draft resolutions. Obviously, you can change it with your legal counsel as you wish, and then our legal counsel will vet that to make sure it still meets our requirements. But that is provided for your review.
Great, thank you. We have another question here. If someone is currently working on a NAAF grant that will expire this year, and a new application, they're hoping to continue that work, and they are also looking to expand into other areas, is that permissible?
Yeah, so we do welcome returning applicants. So the project will need to be different, and I think that's what you're mentioning in the question, is to really build on that project, to do something a little bit, to do something new. It can be in the same vein, but it has to be a new project. So making new impacts. It could be working with the same folks, but in a different area, or going to a higher level, depending on what you're working on with the producers. But yes, returning applicants are able to reapply.
Great. Can an organization submit multiple applications for different programs under the same opportunity? So for example, youth programs in different states.
That is a good question. Let's get back to you on that one. I don't believe so, but I'll please follow up with us by email or by phone call, and we can get you a definitive answer on that one. I can't recall right offhand. Sorry about that.
And what we'll do as well as a follow-up, we will also add this question once we have a confirmation for that to our frequently asked questions section on the webpage. Another question here about allowable funds. Can they use funds to provide stipends or scholarships for students working with us to go to local university?
Yes, so we do allow scholarships and stipends. I'm pretty sure we allow those too. We'll have to follow up on the stipends. I know we do allow scholarships and re-grants. So let's add that one too, Whitney, the stipend part.
Great. Another question is, are the purchases of new work vehicles an allowable expense request in the budget?
Yeah, that's a good question. It would be part of equipment. So I'm pretty sure you would need to really kind of, demonstrate why you need this work equipment, like any other equipment. But we want to know that this is being used for this project, and that it really goes to further your goals, and that it's really serving native farmers and ranchers. So you might want to reach out with more details about what you want to do with the equipment, but we can, there's a line item for equipment that you can place that under.
Great. So I sort of a reiteration, something you touched on earlier, but are NAAF funds considered a non-federal? So if, for example, if awarded, can they use NAAF funding to leverage for a federal grant?
Yes, our funds are completely private, as Tony mentioned in the video. So we're a private charitable trust. I did come out of a class action lawsuit, a settlement with the United States government, the USDA, but our funds at this time are private.
Great. Another question about sort of what is the timeline of the grant if it's for 2 years? So when it would be a start date? When would the awards sort of go out? Do we have an estimate of that?
Yeah, so we're shooting let's start with youth. So as Tony mentioned in the video, youth closes 2 weeks before the general. So we're doing that to try and get those awards out by the start of the school year. So you should be awarded sometime late summer, and you would find out, and then those grant agreements would start. I can't remember the exact dates. They would start near the beginning of the traditional school year. For general, we're shooting for late summer, early fall for those notifications, and we expect them to start on November 1st. And so then that would it would go either the 12, 18, or 24 months from November 1st of this year. And so please do keep that in mind. Obviously, we're working in ag, so a lot of stuff is seasonal. So please keep that in mind and think about the quarterly updates. So it'll be each quarter starting with November 1st. So not along with the traditional quarters of the year. But keep that in mind when you're planning, and there's room for modifications, but we try and limit those as much as possible, just to not have to have you all do all of that work to modify your project. But if that does need to happen, it's okay. But if you just keep that in mind, so plan activities along with the seasons that will be during the project starting November 1st.
Great. A question here about the communal land acquisition. Are the funds meant to be a down payment for a larger loan, or could the $125,000 be used to purchase a small piece of land outright?
Yeah, so really, this is it's a new category to our RFA. And so really the intentions are to help producers have access to land. We know that obviously for production, you have to have land. So it's for down payment is especially part of that. I will have to get back to you on whether you can use it to purchase something outright. So let's add that one too, Whitney, as an FAQ. But just keep in mind when you're imagining, I guess, the piece of land, the parcel, that it needs to be enough where you can tell us that you're gonna show us how you're gonna use this for agricultural production. It could be, if it's something with the university, it could be to do some kind of research and maybe trial fields, something like that. But we really do want to see that it's going to be used for production purposes.
Great. I think, let's see, let's move into the next question here. So we do have a question, sort of a specific, if someone is starting a Head Start program and they want to start an educational garden project that will stay in place year after year using indigenous plants, is that allowable? And could the funding be used to hire someone knowledgeable to help start and educate the staff to keep the garden going for years to come?
Yeah. So did that question say whether it's for youth or general?
It does not, but we can clarify.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. For something like that, and the part I read earlier about what our definitions of farmer and rancher are, community gardens can be included in that. But I would encourage you to go back and listen to maybe the recording and read a little bit more about the keep sequel. This is, I think, helpful for all interested applicants to learn about where the case came from and the kind of production they were involved in. And we're really kind of bound to serving native farmers and ranchers of the types that were claimants and plaintiffs in that case. And so we can get back to you if you have a little bit more information. You can reach out and maybe Whitney has your contact information and we can just talk about that a little bit further.
Yes, absolutely. So we're following up here. If people are willing to share their contact information with us. We also had a more specific questions about sort of allowable expenditures for equipment. So we will make sure to follow up with you directly. So expecting an email from our grants team there. And then another question that came in here: have state recognized tribes been awarded funding in the past?
Yes, we have several state recognized tribes that have been awarded in the past. So per our trust agreement, we are eligible entities include state and federally recognized tribes. So we do invite you to apply. I'm from the state recognized tribe myself. So
great. And then the follow-up question was, is there someone that they could reach out specifically to regarding state recognized tribes in the application process for them? I would encourage you to reach out to our grants at nativeamericanagriculturefund.org email address. Belton, I don't believe that there is a different process unless you want to speak to anything on that.
No, it's the same process. So you will go through and click. I can't recall if we even ask if you're it's just state and federally recognized together. So you click one of those, click that option for tribes, and then you do have to upload your documents for eligibility. And so those might be a little bit different depending on which state, but there is a document that we reference. I think it's from the National Council of State Legislatures. It just has a handy list of all state and federally recognized tribes that we reference. And we'll absolutely follow up with you if we have any questions about that during our initial screening. But the process is the same for state and federally recognized tribes.
Great. And just for clarification, can NAAF funds be used for scholarships?
Yes, NAAF funds can be used for scholarships, grants. I suggest that you read the RFA and you can just, we have a table of contents. So some folks find it, hard to find different information. So we added the table of contents this year, so you can just click and go to the different sections. Let me see right quick while we're on here where exactly you can find that information. So yeah, for educational organizations, scholarships are included, and then other organizations as well for the youth projects. And so you can go to allowable use of funds as well from the table of contents. It's towards the beginning, and that speaks a little bit more about what you can use the funds for. But yeah, scholarships are something that we have funded quite a few times in the past.
Great, thank you. Another question here. This is a specific one about, does beekeeping and the cultivation of native flora for the bees fit within this initiative?
Beekeeping and, do you mind just repeating that one more time?
Beekeeping and the cultivation of native flora for the bees fit in within the initiative.
Yeah, that's certainly interesting. I think, obviously bees are essential to agriculture. So I think for that instance, you'd really need to kind of tie the beekeeping to production agriculture. So maybe you're keeping bees near your vegetable fields for a produce farm, something like that. So you might want to reach out and we can have a dialogue about that and get a little bit more information about what you're looking to do. But it is very broad. And if you're looking to produce honey as well, that's another aspect. So I think for that one, it'd be best if you reach out and we can get a little bit more information about that.
Thank you. Okay, one more question here. I think maybe we sort of talked about this a little bit, but can an organization submit multiple applications for different programs under the same opportunity, which we did talk about that. I don't know if we found another answer for whether or not youth programs in different states could apply. So we'll make sure to follow up with you individually there. Let's see, we have a couple more questions that came through. If an instrumentality is fully owned by a tribe, but managed by a non-tribal member that has been employed with the tribe for a year, does this situation risk not being funded?
Yeah, I wouldn't think so at all. As an instrumentality, you will have to provide the documentation that basically, we allow tribes to decide, as Tony said in the webinar, what their instrumentalities are. And so you'll need to provide that documentation in the application. But I don't think that would disqualify at all.
Great, thank you. And then, Milton, would you mind just providing a quick overview of what is on the RFA webpage? So we have in terms of documents, and then we have frequently asked questions. Would you mind just running through a quick list of that?
Yeah. So on our webpage, so we start out letting you know, welcome to this process. We have a few tabs below, but then the first link is to the RFA. So that's the document that has everything. We call it the RFA overview. And so we recommend that you read through that. You can click the different table of contents and see the different sections that apply to you. General, you'll need to go to the entity type that you are. Youth, it's the same for all the entity types. And then there's the different special focuses. But we do recommend just give it a read through if possible, and read all of that information just once, so you kind of have a general knowledge. Next, we have links to our question list. So as Tony said in the webinar, we really want you to apply if this is something that you think you're a good fit for, and you have a project in mind. But before you start the application in our system, we ask that you go to these question lists and just look through and get an idea of whether you want to apply, and then you can go create your application create your account in our system and start an application. That just helps keep our numbers accurate of folks, because if you don't, if you start an application and you don't finish it, we're going to reach out to you before the deadline and try and just remind you to submit the application if you're still interested. And we don't want to be bugging you if you've decided it's not something you're interested in anymore. And so you have those question lists for general and youth. Then we just have the apply button. So that's where you'll be transferred over to our Found It system. If you click that, we have our deadlines. Again, it's May 18th for the youth. That's a Wednesday at 11:59 Central Time. That is, as Tony said, it's a hard deadline. We have a really tight timeline to get these grants out, and we really want to be able to do that as fast as possible. And so that's a hard deadline. We can't allow you to really edit your application after that. So please reach out. Please try and submit your application maybe a few days in advance, but reach out the day of if you're having any issues, technical issues, so we can try and help you as fast as possible. For general, it's also Wednesday, June 1st, 11:59 Central Time. Then we have our contact information. For the intro, there's just a message about our staff and our board of trustees standing with you all during this pandemic. We have information on eligibility, and this is really straight from our trust agreement. So that's another document if you're able to read through that. It's linked on our website. It can kind of give you a sense of the limitations that we work within. Funding areas, so links to the RFA as again, and then the different general and special foci that we have. And then downloads. So I'll go through really quickly. In addition to the RFA and the general question list, we have a download of our FAQs, our budget guidelines, budget template, sample budget narrative, limited waiver information. So that's only for tribes and instrumentalities. Fiscal sponsor information, that's only if you're an organization that has applied for 501c3 status but has not yet received it, and you're hoping to use a fiscal sponsor. And then we have a Found It application tutorial. And so that's just helping guide you through our system. But the system is pretty straightforward. So you shouldn't need to use that unless you're having any issues, and you can always reach out to us as well. And then there's a checklist that we hope is useful when you're going through your application. You can just kind of check off different things, and a few of them are if applicable. So you just let us know. For the COVID-19 response, we understand things are changing rapidly, I think for the better. So that's not to say, and I think it says in the application as well, but that's not to say your project has to focus on COVID at all. It's just we're trying to collect information on projects that might be kind of in response to COVID. We have the links to our webinar recordings and the registration link if you want to come to another webinar, or just the FAQs. And then we have all of our frequently asked questions. Let's see here. As of today, we have 50, I think over 50 questions, FAQs, and then we have those recordings as well. And you can always reach out to us, and we'll probably add those. We'll be adding more FAQs today from this webinar and going forward as we get them by email.
Great. Another question, Belton, is if the funding is for more than 1 year at a time, or do they need to apply each year?
Yeah, so you can choose between 12 months 18 months, so a year and a half, or 24 months, 2 years. So 2 years is the max that we're allowed to offer an award for. And we are able to offer extensions on a case-by-case basis if for some reason you're not able to complete your project activities. That's been a lot for recently, it's been a lot due to COVID. But you do have to kind of have your timeline and show us that you're able to wrap up those activities within that time period that you select your project length.
Great. I want to make sure I'm not missing any questions here. If you had to submit one and maybe we just let it slip by, please feel free to submit it again here. But again, another resource is for our RFA webpage, as Belton had walked through, but use our email address, grants@nativeamericanagriculturefund.org. I promise members of our team are monitoring that email box. It's not one that just goes into the void. We promise about that. And then I think that is all that we have coming through here. What we're going to do is we're going to have members of our team. We're going to stay on here just for a few more minutes longer, just in case any other last minute questions come in. But for those of you that don't have any more questions, we appreciate you joining us today. And we hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day, and hope to maybe see you next time on the webinar if you have additional questions that come up as you start your application process. So we appreciate everyone's time. Thank you for joining us.
I think I see a question about commercial tribal fishermen. So that can be found in the RFA as well. We do consider fishers to be fishermen, fisherwomen to be part of farmers and ranchers. We know it says farmers and ranchers, and that is a little bit different, but it is included within that definition.
Okay. Hopefully we got everyone's questions answered. And for those of you that had individual questions and have shared your contact information, thank you for doing that. We're going to pass it along. And then some of the questions that we were not able to answer live will be added to the frequently asked questions section on the website. One more question came in here was, can it be used for tribal meat processing plants?
Yes, so that would probably go under ag infrastructure. We know that there's a huge need for tribal meat processing plants, and several tribes with federal funding, COVID funds have built tribal meat processing plants in the last few years. So that's something that we absolutely recognize the need for.
Okay. Thank you so much to everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Winnie. Bye.